How you do, I? See you've stumbled by my little play review. I'm just a little brought down. October's nearly done. What's a little bookworm to do? This week we're discussing Richard O'Brien's Rocky Horror Show. It's not much of a story, but one hell of a play. So sit back, watch my video. I'm just Betty Bookworm, and I read too much into things. Hit it! Hit it! Let me start this review by stating a couple of things. Though I will be mentioning the film at some length, this review is about the Rocky Horror Show. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is the film adaptation of Richard O'Brien's play Rocky Horror Show. The other thing I want to address is I'm not going to review this show. This show is such a cult classic, either you like it or you're wrong. I mean, you don't. So this isn't really a review, it's an analysis. Now I'd like, if I may, you may not, to give you a brief synopsis of the show. Two fuddy-duddy square types named Brad and Janet, asshole slut, get engaged and decide to visit the professor whose class they initially met in. Along the way, their tire blows out, so they walk to a castle to see if they could use the phone. Castles don't have phones, asshole! At the castle, they meet Riff Raff, the handyman, Magenta, the maid, Columbia, the groupie, and the sweet transvestite himself, Frankenfurter. After a rousing musical number where all the guests are encouraged to jump to the left, and then a step to the right, put your hands on your hips, and bring your knees in tight. But it's the pelvic thrust that really drives you insane! And they proceed to do the time warp again. Frank brings them all up to the lab and reveals that he's created the perfect man to satiate his sexual needs. And then Eddie shows up. What happens when you leave meatloaf in the freezer too long? Eddie is Frank's former lover, as well as a lover of Columbia's. When he shows up, he wreaks havoc, so Frank kills him. After Frank seduces everyone in the house, Brad and Janet's old teacher, Dr. Scott, shows up. Timmy! Dr. Scott reveals that Eddie was his nephew, and that everyone in the castle is an alien. And then, for some reason, Frank decides to have a floor show, where he asks the question, what did ever happen to Fay Ray? She went to apeshit! Guys, can you cut it out? This is my review. Whose review is it? And tell us 14 times. Mine. One of the most important aspects of this show is the music. It's the perfect blend of 1950s rock and roll with 1970s glam rock. Even people who aren't fans of the subject matter love the music. Everyone has their favorite song. Damn it, Janet! Wild and untamed thing! Hot patootie! Touch me. And mine is Once in a While. What? Which song is that? I do not think that song is in the movie. Oh my gosh, that's right! They edited the song out of the movie! Once in a while, songs get written out of films when the running time is far too long. And most of the time, it's the best song in the show. Look around and above. The song you love, it is gone. So bookworm, don't cry, like the song's not still in the show. You could always find it on YouTube. Go to the search bar, it'll show you where to go. Keep the tears at bay. The clip will play for you. This show has gained a cult status for its silliness, cheesiness, and seemingly nonsensical plot. But what if I told you this show is a lot more complex than you thought? It's complex in its simplicity, simplistic in its complexity, and brilliant in its stupidity. This whole show is an allegory for the evolution of horror movies, as well as the evolution of music at the time. It is apparent from the very beginning of the show with the song Science Fiction Double Feature that this is meant to parody horror films. The different ages of horror and music are represented through the characters. Eddie, with his naive charm, represents the shake, rattle, and roll of the 1950s, while Frank and Rocky represent the superficial and overt glam of the 1970s. It's even speculated that Frank's aesthetic is based off of David Bowie during the Ziggy Stardust era. And Brad and Janet represent the straight-laced types who never quite got rock. When Frank kills Eddie, it represents the transition in horror films from the 1950s to the 1970s. In the 1950s, horror films were about monsters and more character-driven. In the 1970s, horror was more about gore and aesthetic. The death of Eddie also represents the transition from rock and roll to glam rock. I think it's also hinted at that the 1970s era, whether it be with film or with music, was never going to be as good as the 1950s. Rocky, this ideal 1970s man, is kind of seen as this cheap knockoff of Eddie. I think this is most apparent when Columbia looks at Rocky and goes, "He's okay." The movie ends with the aliens flying back to the planet of transsexual Transylvania and leaving poor Brad and Janet behind. Much like Adam and Eve after they taste the forbidden fruit of seduction, they are cast out of paradise. They're confused, and the audience shares in their bewilderment. Nothing is really solved, and we don't know what to make of the ending. Is it left up to our interpretation? Is it symbolic of something? Or is it just confusing for the sake of being confusing? I have that knowledge! I could explain it to you, or I could end the episode on a weird and downright puzzling note. I've done a lot of these reviews, fueled by tea and lots of booze, and all I know is that I will keep reading, and other bookworms come to feast on books and plays not yet released, to feed their minds and discuss at book club meetings. Strega? Alimona? Paqueta? Sadie? Bookworm? Oh, Rocky!
It's a bird, it's a plane, it's